The most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black as they set their sights on Las Vegas for 2020. Live from the CBS Sports Radio 1140 studios, it's Silver and Black today. Join the conversation by calling 702-889-5978. Now, here's Scott Gulbranson.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Silver and Black today. This morning, we're actually not here. You're going to be listening to a best of the Silver and Black today. That's right. After being on the air for over a year without a week off, I am away for my daughter's college graduation. So we're going to entertain you today with some Raider talk, with some great interviews from the recent past, including Rich Gannon, former Raiders great, NFL MVP, and much, much more. So appreciate it. We'll be back live next week. The show now during the summer, we go on what we call our summer hours. We'll be on the air from 8 to 9 a.m. every Sunday, so the time does not change. We're just cutting it back by an hour, and then we'll be back in a few months back to our 2-hour format. So we certainly help it. I hope you're recovering from the draft. Your draft hangover and withdrawal are coming through. But here you go. Enjoy. First up is the interview with Rich Gannon. You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We are joyed to be joined by, of course, a Raiders fan favorite, and that is Rich Gannon, 18-year NFL career. Of course, Raiders fans love him. He's the last Raider quarterback to take them to the Super Bowl. He was the NFL MVP in 2002, and Matt Katera is my co-host. 4,700 yards that year, 26 touchdowns, 27 the year before, actually. And now a sports analyst on NFL on CBS, of course. And Rich joins us on the attorney Michael Troiano Newsmaker line. Rich, how are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Doing excellent. Good to have you on, Rich.
Doing fantastic. And, hey, a quick personal note, Rich. I just want to say thank you for your work around celiac disease. I have an 11-year-old son who has celiac disease, was diagnosed at 2. Your story about your daughter at 1 year old, and my son at 2 was about the same. So thank you for all the awareness and all the work you've done in that area.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, it's an autoimmune disorder that affects as many as 1 in 133 Americans. So it's a lot more common than people think. And we're gluten-free here in the Gannon household. And so, but thank you for recognizing really most of my wife's hard work. Shelly's been a real advocate for celiac disease. Oh, yeah, I know. We know that, too. We are a gluten-free house as well. All right, well, let's dive into the football now, Rich. And, of course, we are the only all-Raiders talk show here in Las Vegas, the future home of the Raiders. And the Raiders this year, everyone knows about the struggles, but at the same time, the Raiders, you know, they're making progress. If you look at all the roster changes, if you look at some of the young talent that they've put on this roster, you're starting to see, as you would expect, week-to-week improvement. What have you seen so far that encourages you about what John Gruden and what the organization's doing there in Oakland? I would agree. I mean, I think when you really look under the hood, I think they gave the Chiefs all they could handle last week. Obviously beating the Cardinals was an important win, and you hope you can build some momentum off of that. But, look, Rome wasn't built in a day, and they've made some dramatic changes out there in Oakland, and I'm not just talking about personnel. And I think it's going to take a while. I know it's tough when you're trying to play football on offense with 2 rookies at tackles, and Colton Miller's learning on the job, and, Brandon Parker's had struggles. And then, you look at the injury situation, and, losing a guy like Marshawn Lynch is significant in terms of what you're trying to get accomplished running the football. And I really thought they'd be a better rushing football team than what they've been. And then, obviously some of the trades, I think moving on from Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, I think on the long haul will be a benefit to this team when you look at accumulating not only draft picks and players and free agency, but having the ability, having the resources, the financial resources to be able to do that. And I agree with both trades. I love Khalil Mack, but I just felt like, to pay him that kind of money for a team that was going to be really in a kind of a reset mode was going to be hard to do. And then Amari Cooper has been kind of inconsistent, guys. I think everyone knows that about him. And so I think it's a chance to get a look at some of the younger players. But, look, I have a lot of confidence that John Gruden's doing the right thing. We've had some conversations. I know it's been a painful, painful journey so far, but hopefully they finish strong here in December and carry some of that momentum into the off-season program.
Hey, Rich, Matt Gutierrez here. You know as well as anybody that it's the team's success largely comes down to how the quarterback and the coach get along together. You had more success with John Gruden really than any other quarterback he's had. I was surprised to see that even in only 3 years with Gruden, you had more starts under him than any other quarterback that he's had. How much of this success with this team going forward hinders on the work ethic that these two have, and what does it take to get into that room with John Gruden and to get on his level and be the kind of quarterback that he expects you to be?
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, I think if you want to be great and you love football, I don't know that there's a better person to work with. And I think you have to embrace that opportunity and the challenge of working with John. He's ultra competitive. He's highly motivated. He's compassionate. He's got a lot of things that you love, not just in terms of a play caller, but also a head coach. And I tried to impress upon Derek in the off season when we had time to visit at mini camp, at training camp, just about embracing that. And I think he's done that. And I think a lot of people are making a big deal about the relationship. I think the relationship is fine. I think it will continue to grow and mature and evolve. And look, you can criticize Derek all you want. He's shown twice as many touchdowns as interceptions so far. He's completing almost 70% of his passes. The protection has not been great at times. The defense has been disappointing, to say the least. And so you have to go out and score 30 points every week to be competitive. So I think Derek's going to be just fine. I think this is, obviously the first year together, and John Gruden and I's first year together was full of peaks and valleys. But we were able to come through that. We finished 8-8. We beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead the last game of the season. That really carried into the following season, I thought. We had momentum, and the following season we went 12-4 and really had one of our best teams in Oakland.
Yeah, again, we're talking to Rich Gannon, former Raiders great, and, of course, the NFL MVP in 2002. Rich, staying on Derek Carr, in my view, there's been a lot of, I think, unfair criticism of him out there, trying to make him a scapegoat a lot of the times. When yes, any quarterback, it doesn't matter, especially for fans who think they're coaches sometimes. They can look at a quarterback's performance and pick it apart. But I think he continues to get more comfortable. Again, fourth playbook in 5 years. Now on the back end of this season, you're starting to see him get more comfortable. What are you seeing from him the last few weeks that show that he's progressing where I'm sure Coach Gruden wants him to be?
I think you look at the feet. That's important. His footwork, the anticipation, getting the ball out quick, just looking comfortable under center. He's always had the big arm. I think accuracy's never really been an issue for Derek. I just think it's continuing to run the offense and to do the little things necessary to be really efficient. And some of that requires changing plays, changing protections, changing formations, and doing it on the fly. And there's a lot of responsibility on the quarterback in this offense at the line of scrimmage. There's multiple play calls. There's checks for the run game, away from the down safety or to the guard bubble or to the reduction or all these different rules. And so it involves a lot of studying and memorization and preparation each week. I think Derek has done that. I think he's getting more and more comfortable. I think he's getting a better understanding of how John calls the game, what he's looking for, what are the rules and the system. As you point out, he's had so much change around him. That's a very almost debilitating thing for a quarterback. If you're constantly changing head coaches, coordinators, quarterback coaches, systems, playbooks, it's hard. And I think that certainly affected his growth and development. But still, when you look at what he's done and the numbers and the production, you have to be encouraged. The one thing that's discouraging is the one-loss record. And I think that's something that he's got to get straightened out. It's not just Derek, it's the entire football team. But ultimately, that's how we're judged in this business. It's not how many yards you throw or how many touchdowns or, the guy in Detroit throwing a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns, and he's got a lot of those type of things, but he doesn't have a lot of wins, especially not against teams with winning records. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be the important thing for Derek. He's got to find a way, regardless of the personnel around him, to get his team to the finish line each week. to be more competitive, to be a better decision maker, to be able to have his team in position in the fourth quarter to win games. And I think that's the next step for Derek Carr.
Rich, I want to expand a little bit on him grasping this offense. You know how difficult that offense is, and a lot of talk about essentially the paragraph-long play calls that Gruden likes to throw at you. How hard was it for you back in '99 to really get a hold of that system and that verbiage and really get comfortable with it?
I was fortunate because I had come from Kansas City. I'd spent 4 years there prior to my arrival in Oakland, and it was very similar system. The terminology and the verbiage was very similar, the protections, and so I also had the benefit of being a veteran quarterback and knowing how to prepare, knowing how to study, knowing how to take a game plan, and really breaking it down and memorizing early in the week the protections and the formations and so that when the play came in, it was second nature to me. So I think he's learned that. I really don't believe the mental aptitude is at all an issue for a guy like Derek. I was there in the mini camps. I was there in training camps. I sat in the quarterback rooms, the quarterback meetings. He is very sharp. He's got a high football IQ. It comes out of his mouth very quickly. He understands all the rules, the adjustments, the checks. So I really don't think that's so much of the issue. Sometimes it's not whether or not the quarterback can handle it, guys. It's whether or not the other 10 players can. Remember now, you got a bunch of rookies playing. You got to be protection conscious with the tackles. You've got some young receivers playing. So I think it's not just in terms of what the quarterback can handle, but what can the other 10 players handle as well.
Well, and Rich, when you look at this year, too, as a player, when you're in a situation where you're having a down year from a win-loss perspective like the Raiders are having this year, what sort of accomplishments and goal setting do you set internally for yourself as a player and then as a team so that you feel like you're making that progress and you can turn so many negatives into positives, as you said at the end of that 8-8 season for you, and moving it so that when you go off season, you're feeling much more positive than you did maybe in the middle of it?
It's a great point. Unfortunately, you can have all these goals and say, well, if I complete 70%, and we don't turn the ball over, and we're good on third down and situational football down the red zone, then I'm doing what I have to do to put my team in a best position to have a chance to win. Problem is if you do that and you still lose, and you get on that bus and you head back to the plane and you're flying home, you feel terrible. So unfortunately, in the business that we're in, there's no consolation prizes. There's no, hey, you completed 75% and threw 4 touchdowns and no picks, but you still lost. I mean, I've had those games, and it feels really bad. So I just think the important thing for Derek is just focusing in on all the little things it takes to be competitive. I think to be more and more demanding of his teammates. To make sure that everyone is on the same page, make sure everyone's done the work during the course of the week. I was a sticker for that, guys, because when I went out to Oakland, it wasn't, I mentioned before, it was a bit dysfunctional, and guys that were there when I first got there weren't there. Following year, a couple years later, we eventually got rid of them because a lot of those guys didn't understand what it meant to be professional. They didn't understand what it meant to take great pride in your preparation, your performance each week, just getting ready to play the game. And so that's going to be important for Derek. He puts in so much time and effort and energy in preparing that you got to make sure the young guys are doing the same.
They're doing the same.
They're demanding of them.
And Rich, I know
that's what Peyton Manning does.
Yep.
Did, and that's what Drew Brees does and Tom Brady. They're very demanding of their teammates, and that's what's going to be important for Derek.
Well, and that's what we hear fans, because fans, when they come up to us, whether we're at a remote broadcast or we're online, whatever, they say to us, how come he's not doing what Rich Gannon did? How come he's not getting up in the face of his linemen and screaming orders and saying, hey, and it's not that you were just screaming at those guys. You were demanding that they do their jobs and they focus and they work hard. And so I think you have become that benchmark for Derek Carr. And I know it's not fair to compare one quarterback to the other all the time, but certainly that's what's happened.
Rich,
well, when I was in Kansas City, if you ever watched any of the games where I played for 4 years there, I never had to do that. I was never part of my MO. But when I went out to Oakland, I realized, at some point you got to speak up. At some point you got to put your foot down. If what you're seeing on the practice field, if what you're seeing in the meeting room and the weight room is not up to the standards that we've set as an organization, and then you better speak up as a veteran guy. And I did that because I thought I needed to. I thought it was an organization that lacked leadership in some key areas. The locker room, in my opinion, wasn't very good. It eventually got to be pretty good when we brought in the right type of players, guys like Jerry Rice and John Torella and Rod Woodson and Trace Armstrong and, Bill Romanowski. I go on and on. The types of, the guys that took really a great deal of pride in being professionals. So that's what you have to continue to do. This roster is going to look very different next year as it's looked different this year.
The whole year.
And it continues to look different, but you just got to make sure you're bringing in the right type of player, the player that really loves competing, working together for a common goal, and ultimately trying to win a championship for the Oakland Raiders.
Now, Rich, we'll get you out on this. Big elephant in the room out here, obviously. The stadium's being built right down the street from where we're at. Raiders are coming to Las Vegas. You played for them in Oakland. What do you think about the move here? How do you think this organization fits in with Las Vegas?
I got on board early because I knew they weren't going to get a stadium built in Oakland. I think the Las Vegas situation is an incredible opportunity for not just the organization but for Raider fans. I think it's going to be a new beginning in terms of a new stadium, new practice facility. It's going to help make our organization more competitive in terms of free agency, in terms of revenue and those type of things. That's important in order to run a successful team in today's NFL. So I think it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see it built. I know a lot of the folks that are down there. Tom Bland is one of my guys that's down there and very active and with the stadium construction. Mortensen Construction are friends of mine. So I know it's going to be an incredible facility, and I'm just anxious not only to see it, but to call a game there for the preseason and also for CBS. But I just want to see this team do well, guys. You know that about me. I am neutral. I work for a network that broadcasts the NFL games, but I got a special place in my heart, as you know, for the Raiders and for Derek. I want to see Derek. I don't want to see him do well. I want to see him crush it, and I want to see John Gruden get what he deserves because no one works harder than John Gruden.
All right. Great way to end it, Rich. And we'll catch up with you during the offseason. We certainly thank you for all your time today.
You guys are the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks to Rich for joining us. Very, very gracious with his time. You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbranson.
No, you're not in a time warp. You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We are going to now bring in Jason Fitzgerald. He's a cap expert and money contract expert with overthecap.com. Jason, thanks for being with us here on Silver and Black today.
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. I appreciate you taking time out on your Sunday. I know how busy it's been for you this week. We look at the NFL salary cap. The first thing I wanted to do is, those of us who cover the NFL and live this stuff, breathe it every day, we kind of look at it a lot, and we understand some of the terminology. I think for the average fan, one of the things we wanted to do was have you on at first to talk about, okay, the NFL salary cap. How does it work, and how it came to be and its intent, and how it's impacted the game. Let's start there, Jason. The NFL salary cap, how old is it, and what was the intent of the league to do it in order to create, I think, more parity amongst the league?
Well, you're going back all the way to the early 90s, which is really when the salary cap came into play. And, a lot of people think the salary cap is a real difficult thing. It's not really that difficult. I mean, it's basically an accounting system. It's basically designed to prevent certain teams, you go back into those times, teams like the Dallas Cowboys, for example, from having unlimited resources to go out every year and just spend a ton of money on specific players, whether it's each year you sign a whole bunch of new players, you don't really have to account for it. So they came up with a system to put a hard limit on the way that you can account for the salary cap charges that come for these players. And there's really not a lot of difference between the way that a player is paid and what their salary cap charge is, unless a team uses what's called the signing bonus. And the signing bonus is a big chunk of money that's paid at the front of the contract, and that divides equally over the term of the entire contract up to 5 years. It used to be 7 years, and teams would kind of abuse that, so they brought it down more and more to create more parity in the NFL. So that's really the basics of the salary cap. In terms of impact it's had on the league, it's had a lot. It's teams have had to devote more resources to studying the way that you do NFL contracts, how to optimize the efficiency and the payouts of them, so you can go into free agency year after year, or that you're not pinched to be able to sign your own free agents. Teams that have mishandled it, they've had struggles. Those great Cowboys and 49ers teams had to kind of dismantle because of the salary cap. The Raiders would be a perfect example of it back in 2012, 2013. They basically turned themselves into an expansion team because of bad contractual decisions and contract structures that happened for, a good 4 or 5 year period. Even now you're seeing it with teams like the Miami Dolphins, who are basically stripping themselves completely down because the way their cap was structured and the way their contracts were structured just didn't match the production on the field. And it gets to a point where you just can't get any better if you just keep sinking money into the same players by trying to find ways to account for it. And, so it still has a pretty big impact, but teams are getting a lot better at managing it to where it doesn't hurt them as much in the future.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You mentioned the Raiders. When Reggie McKenzie came in, he had a bevy of problematic contracts. I think the Raiders had more than $45 million of dead money, and I know that the Dolphins are there now. Can you explain a little bit about the dead money?
The dead money for the Raiders back then was gigantic.
Right.
And, that's obviously concern for most teams. When you look at the way that deals are structured, one of the things that you want to look at is really what that dead money is going to be when that player is potentially going to be released. A lot of times people talk about salary guarantees, and that's also very important. But the way those deals are structured, that still has a big deal. For example, the Lions this week signed Trey Flowers to a contract that has a signing bonus of almost $30 million. That means even 4 years into his deal, it's going to cost you $10 million in dead money to release the player. That's a lot, even with the salary cap going up, more and more.
Right.
That's a big number. So those things are still important that come into play.
Well, you talk about guarantees. Now, there's fully guaranteed, there's conditional guaranteed. I know Raider fans, unfortunately, remember Rolando McClain, and he was suspended those 2 games. And then, ultimately he was cut for conduct detrimental to the team, and then that voids all the guarantees, correct?
Yeah, so when you have guarantees in a contract, for example, the Raiders right now don't use signing bonuses anymore, but they use a lot of guarantees that would usually happen in the second year of a contract. And usually those guarantees, if a player does something, can be voided, and that can avoid having to pay that money out. It avoids the dead money involved with it. McClain, he was suspended for conduct detrimental. Usually steroid suspensions will void future guarantees, and really any kind of drug suspension. So there's also a benefit to not using those signing bonuses, which are only subject to a minor amount of forfeiture, compared to using guarantees where the whole guarantee is void usually if the player does something that just doesn't put the team in a positive light or just hampers the player's abilities.
Hey, Jason, this is Kelly. Unused cap space can be rolled over every year. Is there a certain amount, like up to a certain percent of the cap that can be rolled over, or how do they figure out how much can be rolled over from year to year?
No, you can just roll over as much as you want. So basically, when you see these teams with these large amounts of salary cap rollover, what that means is they've probably gone through a period of time where they just didn't spend a lot of money. The Indianapolis Colts, for example, the New York Jets, they stripped their rosters down. They didn't spend a lot of cap dollars. They didn't spend a lot of real dollars. So they would just carry over this money to amass huge amounts of cap space to go out and maybe have 1 year. The Jets, for example, would be this year, where you go out and you sign a bunch of contracts and you don't really pay that much attention to the way the cap charges are going to break down because you have so much money.
Yeah. Now, so again, we're talking to Jason Fitzgerald from overthecap.com. Jason, now let's focus on the Raiders right now. Clearly, they were active this past week, and if you look at the guaranteed money and how that impacts their salary cap, they had a lot to spend, right? If you look at them now after this first week, the needs that they still have, and of course the draft coming up next month, where do they sit? Is there any concerns that you see, or are they in a pretty good spot?
Well, with the cap, they're in a pretty good spot. I think with the Raiders, I think the thing with them right now is you also have to consider these teams have a cash budget, right? You can only spend so much money, and the Raiders have spent a pretty good amount of money this year, and their draft, because they have 3 top draft picks, those picks are actually going to cost them a lot of money. Maybe not so much in terms of cap dollars. It'll cost them about $13 million in cap room, but those top 4 picks alone, they're probably going to have to cut about $40 million worth of checks between now and next March. So that's a ton of money for any football team. So they might be a little tight with their actual budget, but they, cap-wise, they're perfectly fine this year, and they should be fine next year as well.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, clearly, from a cash perspective, the Raiders coming to Las Vegas, that's one of the main reasons they're coming here, right? Which is the idea that they're going to generate more revenue with the new stadium and all of the other things that come along with that. When you look across the NFL, Jason, in the week that we saw, was there anybody who is the perfect example? Because you mentioned this has now become a big industry, and there are capologists, as they call them, on each team. Each team hires attorneys and folks who understand contracts and this system. And some teams, let's face it, are just better than others. Is there a team out there that sticks out to you who's really doing this well and showed that again this week?
There's a couple of teams that do this well. I mean, the Patriots always do this well, but they weren't very active. The 49ers generally are a team, I think, that handles their salary cap very well. You can question some of the decisions they make. I think it's the players they sign. You look at them this week, they did sign a lot of players with big injury history, Quan Alexander, Dee Ford. But they usually are able to structure their contracts in a way that are very team-friendly. They have what we call vesting dates, which is when an injury guarantee becomes a full guarantee. They have dates that run into April for those. They put a lot of money in these contracts that players will lose if they actually don't play on Sunday. They're usually able to hammer out pretty good valuations on a lot of their players. Not everybody, but on a lot of their guys, they're able to do that. I think they usually do a pretty good job with it. I think that was pretty evident this week since they were one of the more active teams.
Excellent. Well, Jason Fitzgerald, overthecap.com. He's also a contributor over on the Sporting News. Jason, thanks again. I'm sure we'll reach out to you again. We appreciate you taking time on your Sunday.
Yep.
Thanks, Jason.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
All right. Jason Fitzgerald, check out overthecap.com. It's a great site, too, guys, to kind of educate yourself. Like if you have a question on a contract or if you want to see what's going on, overthecap.com is a good one. So we got a little bit of education there, I think.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, frankly, when I talked to Mark Bedane from the Raiders one time, and I mentioned salary cap. He's like, we're not worried about the cap. It's more the cash we're worried about and how you structure those deals. And the Raiders do deal. Each team does contracts differently. He mentioned they don't really give signing bonuses anymore. They structure it differently, which makes a big deal. But really interesting. I think for most fans, it's just hard to navigate what the terms are more than it is the actual concepts, right?
Yeah. The NBA has a set thing. If you're drafted number 1, you get a set salary, number 2 all the way down. And for the NFL, not Wild West, but it's a little more complicated. And so it's fascinating to talk to the cap. I love people don't think about all the moves and all the 2-3 steps ahead that you have to think about when you're signing certain players and certain contracts.
Yeah.
Because you got to look ahead.
Well, we're going to step aside. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk about defense in the NFL. Do you need a dominant defense? The Raiders should draft all defense in the first round. That's my point of view. We'll see if the guys agree. You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Radio.com presents Summer Jam, starring Ellie Goulding.
Hi, this is Ellie Goulding. And we're gonna let it burn.
Summer Jam, also featuring Allie Brooke, Ava Max, Madison Beer, Fletcher, Thursday, May 30th, inside the Chelsea at the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas. Tickets on sale now. Summer Jam, brought to you by Finley Chevrolet, Sprint, and Radio.com.
CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbranson.
You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We are excited to be joined today by Raiders great, Hall of Famer, and to me, one of the best football players to ever play the game in the NFL, and that, of course, is Mike Haynes. Played 14 seasons in the NFL, 4 All-Pro selections, 9 Pro Bowls. In the course of his career, 46 interceptions, 688 interception return yards. And I remember one specifically in Miami. Drafted number 5 overall in the 1976 draft out of ASU to the Patriots. Joined the Raiders in 1983. That was a pretty good year to join the Raiders. Mike Haynes, thanks for joining us here on the Silver and Black Today.
Thank you. And by the way, ASU, that stands for Arizona State, just in case people don't know.
Well, as well as that university has grown, I think people are starting to take notice if they don't already know. All right, well, let's talk. We're going to talk a little bit about your career in the time that we have. Let's start with that year you joined the Los Angeles Raiders, 1983. Of course, culminated in the Super Bowl. That defense that you played on in 1983 and 84 in the Super Bowl, was that really the highlight of your career that year in the Super Bowl victory against the Redskins by the score of 38-9?
Actually, I have to say it probably is. You know, I didn't know it at the time. I thought I'd have another trip to the Super Bowl with that defense we had, but it didn't work out that way. It was really a lot of fun for me because there were so many great players, and you know, now we know how he belonged in the Hall of Fame, and I think Lester Hayes should be in the Hall of Fame, and a lot of other guys on that team. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I was fortunately coached by Coach Flores, who kind of changed my whole mindset about the importance of removing stress from the game and from your preparation, and I really think that had a lot to do with our success.
And Coach Flores obviously should be in the Hall of Fame. We all thought it was going to happen this year. It's well overdue. I can't think of a reason why he's not there. Can you?
I cannot, and I actually talked to him about it at the Hall of Fame, and I'm hoping that this year, because it's a special year, it's a 100-year celebration, they're talking about putting some additional guys in, and I'm hoping he's one of those guys that gets in under that new type of formula.
Well, I know Raider Nation is excited about that and wants to make it happen. And as we stand here, and I'm looking at you in your gold jacket, the closest I've been to one in a while. Let me ask you this question: the game today has changed a lot. When you played on the Raiders, you and Lester Hayes, I mean, I can't think of two guys who could cover better. With the way the game has changed, with what we saw in the playoffs with the Saints and the Rams, we don't have to relive all of that, but the way it's changed, how would you have to play the game today, and how would you have to change your game, do you think?
Well, I don't think I would have to change my game a whole heck of a lot. I mean, the 5-yard bump rule is pretty much the same. And you know, being the fierce tackler that I was, I don't think I'd have to really change my tackling style. I'd have to be careful, though. Like if what we used to always say is the guy's not down till he's down. So part of his body is still up, then you still try to punish him. And I might have to change the way I approach that. But that would really be about it. Lester would have to change a lot more than I would. He was very, very aggressive and took different chances that I didn't take. And but it would have been a lot of fun. I think we both would have been able to play under the current rules.
Well, and on that defense that you played on with the Raiders, you know, everybody talks about the 1985 Bears, of course. That defense you were on, remarkable. And we talked about the Super Bowl a little earlier. To hold the Redskins going into that game, highest scoring offense in NFL history, you held them to 9 points, and you had a big play in that, including a big interception in the Super Bowl. Talk about that defense. I mean, you had a lot of guys on that defense, very, very colorful personalities. You were known as a gentleman Raider. How was it for you, and how did you interact with all those guys?
Well, I had a lot of fun with them. I think when I first became a Raider, I had a lot to learn. I broke a lot of rules that, you know, that I didn't know that they had in place, and I can't even tell you about them, you know, on air here in case one of those guys finds out. But I loved it, and it was a different culture, a lot different from the culture I was used to. You know, they were really good guys, and you know, a lot of people only know the Raiders as, you know, big hitters, tough guys, mean guys, and stuff like that. They really don't know that in the off season we did a lot of charity work. I mean, we go around and play different, you know, groups, organizations in basketball and softball and things like that. Raise a lot of money for our local charities, and believe it or not, even in charities in other states, because there's Raider fans all over the country.
There is, as we're learning here in Las Vegas as the team prepares to move here. Now, Mike, when you look at the current state of the Raiders, there's a lot of excitement. Of course, there was a little bit of frustration last year, which I expected because, everyone was excited when Coach Gruden came back. I know you were. The way they're building it now, though, this is a big year, a big draft. Talk about the excitement around the organization and what you've seen, because I know you're active.
Well, I think like a lot of Raider fans, I think we started off thinking last year that, hey, we're going to get to the playoffs this year. It's going to be great. And that didn't happen. And, and then they made a lot of changes, with getting rid of some players and different things. And I felt really low, but right now I'm very optimistic. I mean, they've made some different changes and bringing in some new people like Antonio Brown. This guy is a phenomenal player. I'm excited to see what he does when he joins the team. And there's other guys, too, that they're bringing. But I'm a defensive guy, so I always say I want defense. I want to see defensive guys come in, that an Antonio Brown defensive player. That's what I want to see, the guy who makes things happen on that side of the ball, because it's really defense that wins games. But I have to say, right now I'm super optimistic about this season.
Well, the Raiders have addressed some of their needs in the defensive backfield at your old position and at safety. I know you do a lot with younger players. What kind of advice are you giving them now as they're in that building process under Paul Guenther?
Well, I haven't really had a chance to talk to the current players at all. But if I did have a chance, I would just tell them that, you cannot approach this game without using your help. And you need to know where your help is on running plays and pass plays. And a great defense is a defense that talks a lot. And so, like, I've been to several training camps of teams. Arizona State, we're talking about them. It was the quietest defensive I'd ever seen in my life. And I mentioned that to Herman. And so I've seen the same thing in pro defenses. When the ball is in the air, in our air, the safety was yelling, ball, 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 Mike, ball. If it's a run or a pass, we're yelling run or run, pass, pass, It's just a lot of communication. And that's what it takes to have a great defense. Everybody is thinking exactly the same, and I don't have to turn my head to see if I have a guy coming from my left. I hear him. I'm outside. So I know I can just come in and focus my attention on the guy in front of me, the offensive runner. So that's what it takes. And so today, when I do talk to guys, I talk to them a little bit about technique, because there's a lot of things that, we learned. And over 14 years, I probably had 9 different position coaches, and all of them were great. And learning a little bit from each one of them. So I have a little bit more information than maybe a typical guy. And so I try to share that. But most of the difference is between the ears. It's what you think and how you approach the game and being ready for every single thing. There's a lot of guys that don't even really warm up before the game. But if the first play of the game was a deep ball and you're not warmed up, you could, that's a touchdown. So I try to talk to them about preparation and really playing for each other, and get them to realize it's not about them; it's about the defense. And for me, it was always about our defense. Our offense, that's out of my control. But I can be in the huddle. I'm in the meetings. I can have an impact on the defense. So that's where my focus was.
Well, and with the way the NFL is now, with spread offense all over the place, that's even more important, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. And, it's really kind of fun to watch the ball in the air, that, so many pass plays. I would love to be playing today. It would be a lot more fun.
That's what Cliff Branch says to me, too, when I talk to him. Well, let's also talk a little bit about why we're talking to you a bit today, which is about the Raider Foundation. They're having their Celebrity Swing coming up here at Top Golf on May 8th to benefit a great cause. You talked about how much the Raiders do in the community. For those folks that are in Las Vegas, we have listeners all over the country and all over the world, but here in Las Vegas, I think they don't understand just how involved the Raiders are in their communities and what they do. Talk about your involvement here and what you look to do.
Well, the Raiders, the foundation has always been involved with young people. Last year, I think the benefactor of the event was the military, the veterans, Veterans Village, and that's not unusual for the Raiders. It's usually it's going to be the veterans, or it's going to be the young people. And this year, it's communities in schools. Again, it's young people, and it's really for kind of people who have lost their way, you might say. When parents don't have money to buy clothes or buy food, or kids are missing school an awful lot and no one really knows why. There'll be a counselor at each one of these schools that are involved in the program, trying to help those families and those kids make sure they have what they need to succeed in school. If it's, teaching them how to read or making sure they have books to read. And the Raiders have been great. There's a lady here named Sherry that I've met since I've been here in the last couple of days, and she shared some of the things that the Raiders have done to make sure that these kids have what they need. The Raiders have been great and created this beautiful room where they have everything they could possibly need, and then they've also given them money to do the same type of thing for several other schools in the area. So that's not unusual for the Raiders to do, and it's important, I think, for the public to know that that's what a lot of pro teams do, but the Raiders love doing that. Then you see the guys getting out in the community, and then even some of these guys sitting down and reading stories to the kids, making a huge difference. And so I remember how that impacted me as a kid growing up in Los Angeles when the Lakers and the Dodgers would come out and talk to us, hey, what kind of grades you getting? Hey, make sure you treat your mom with respect and things like that, and those things stick with you. And so when you can imagine if Charles Woodson was sitting down reading a book to a 6th grade class or a 4th grade class or whatever, and this is a guy that kid idolized or whatever, you can imagine the impact it would have on his life. So the Raiders have done that and done a wonderful job of that. And, that team hasn't even moved to Las Vegas yet, and they're already getting entrenched in the community with programs like this.
And one last question with you, Mike. I mean, you played in Los Angeles for the Raiders, of course, which was their second location. Now they're going to be going to the third. It's a little bittersweet for the fans in Oakland, of course. I think the fans in L.A. are pretty excited. It's a little closer. Talk about the move to Las Vegas and what you think it means to the franchise and to the legacy of the Raider franchise.
Well, to be totally honest, completely honest, I'm a little worried because, Las Vegas, I'm not sure that the Raiders are going to have a home field advantage because when they're in Los Angeles, when they're in Oakland, of course, you got a lot of fans there, and they all come to the game. And I'm sure they're going to come to the game here too. But when whoever they're playing in another city, those people who normally wouldn't travel with their team, they're going to want to come now. And they're going to be here, and their team is going to be buying a lot of tickets. And then you can imagine the football is starting to, a little bit be a lot more popular around the globe. You can imagine groups in Europe selling tickets to come to Las Vegas, see a Raider game, groups from Asia, groups from Mexico. And so I worry that at least if those people come from these other countries, that they're at least going to be Raider fans. If they're going to be unbiased and sitting in the stadium and just watching the game, that's not going to be cool to me. So I worry about it, but I really think that for football, for pro football, for the NFL, I think it's a great thing. And I think it's going to really help grow a game, increase the fan base, and be a lot more fun for people to watch football. I think football, pro football, is the 10th most popular sport in the world, and soccer's number 1. Well, maybe we can start to move down the list and eventually become number 1.
All right, Mike Haynes, Hall of Famer Raiders, I appreciate you taking the time today.
All right, thank you for having me.
You're listening to the best of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbranson.
Welcome back to Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas, Nevada. That's right, the future home of your Raiders. Hello, Raider Nation. And speaking of Raider Nation, I think one of the most visible, recognizable fans of all in Raider Nation, if you see a picture of this guy, you know exactly who he is, and that is the Violator. His name is Wayne Mabry. He has been a Raiders season ticket holder since 1987, one of the first 4 original members of the Black Hole. And I'm sure that if you saw a picture of him, you would know exactly. If you look on our Twitter handle, you will see it adorned in what is an amazing transformation and costume as he becomes the Violator. It takes him a lot of time every Sunday to get ready for that. We go out and we talk to Wayne. Wayne, welcome to Silver and Black Today.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing well. And, hey, we are excited to talk to you just because I think that one of the things I believe to be the most special parts of Raider Nation is, of course, the fans and fans like yourself who have gone that extra step and become what I call a super fan because of the time, effort that you put into not only going to games and being a season ticket holder, but
this whole persona that you take on is really remarkable, the time, money, and effort that you put into it. Tell us, how did you get to that point where you decided that you were going to become the Violator and create that character?
Well, it started back in basically 1991, the year I released him from captivity in my mind. We used to sit behind the bench at that time in the Coliseum, and for some reason the crowd just didn't seem to be as involved in the game as I felt football fans should be. So I figured, I got this spirit that's in me. I figured, let me bring this out and kind of like see if I could get the crowd ignited, bring some of that college atmosphere back to the game.
Yeah,
L.A. was kind of like L.A. laid back cool to me, and I'm like, we're at a football game, so nobody sits down at a football game.
There you go, right? It should be a rule. But I'll tell you what, I think that the time, like I talked about the time, right? Because the way I look at it is what you do, not only do you get that crowd fight out, you become part of the game. And so you, in essence, take on this persona and become an entertainer and become part of the game experience for other fans, which is really remarkable. Now, it takes you, about 2 hours? Talk about what you have to do to get into character and get ready for each and every game that you dress up as the Violator.
Transformation itself is about a 2-hour process, give or take. I've got all of the gear that I have to put on, but the biggest part of the transformation is when I go into putting on the war paint. And that takes about an hour of just trying to focus as much as I can on what I'm doing, because my mind is already into the game and the pregame festivities and the whole 9 yards. Kind of like seeing the game in my head before it's played. And, that's called visualization. But anyway, by the time I get about half done with the paint part, this other spirit takes over, basically.
That's awesome.
And the hardest part is just getting it finished, and putting on all the accessories and, like I say, getting to the arena.
Yeah, it's remarkable how great and how recognizable you've become. I mean, there's other folks that you're in the black hole with there, Gorilla, Voodoo Man, Skull Lady, Darth Vader, all those folks that I think TV fans have especially, and fans at the games have become accustomed to. Now, part of that, though, and I think this is where, and Wayne, I'll be honest with you, I grew up in San Diego, so I grew up not liking the Raiders as a kid. And so looking at those characters, I think a lot of people get the wrong impression, right? They look at you and this persona and how you're dressed and assume that this is some sort of environment down there in the black hole that is unruly and full of people that aren't very nice. It's actually the opposite, isn't it?
We are outstanding leaders in our community, Scott. We're family people. All that is, and I'm just referring to myself, is letting you see what's on the inside of me on game day. I feel like that all the time, but going through transformation lets the world visualize what my spirit is like inside all the time. Basically, we're just people we're die-hard fans of our team. We believe in being loud and boisterous, because I've been told by players that, they feed off of that energy. Like I said, it's a college-type mentality. Just because you're pros don't mean that you still don't relate with the crowd. Now, if that ever changes in the game is going to be totally different.
Yes, and again, we're talking to Wayne, the Violator Mabry, super fan, member of the Black Hole, original member of the Black Hole, actually, too. Now, Wayne, obviously, what's happening with the Raiders, the move it's painful for everybody who's involved, and especially for the great fans up in Oakland to be able to be losing your team and all the tradition that you're a part of is very difficult. Even though the future looks bright here in Las Vegas, it's been tough for you. You wrote a piece right when you thought that it was going to be the last game up in Oakland, which we all kind of thought it could be. And it sounds like now they'll be back for one more year. But it's painful because you have to say goodbye to all of that stuff and all the time you put in and all the effort. Talk about that for you and the emotions involved in knowing that they're leaving Oakland, and then some of the issues for you for when they come to Las Vegas.
Well, first of all, for me, as a kid watching them back in the 70s, Oakland to me was Mecca. And like I say, my childhood dream was to move to California from Mississippi just so I could attend games in person. All of that became true in 77 when I moved to California. Actually didn't get to go to a game until 84 in the LA Coliseum. But like I say, that was the beginning of everything for me, kind of like living your dream. And so the move away from just say California period, yeah, it tears you apart. But you have to look at it. This is a business. This business will not go in the toilet. So they have to make whatever moves necessary for them to sustain that excellence. And we will be back to that excellence. And I just hope I'm around to be in that Super Bowl standing right there front and center.
Yes, again, we're talking to Wayne Violator Mabry. And Wayne, I know that for you and for a lot of folks, let's be honest, when you move into a brand new stadium that you're building, prices are going to go up. It's going to be expensive. And I know you're retired, fixed income, so you're not really sure if you're going to be able to get, in essence, the same seats and if you'll be in the same area. I know you put your deposit down, you said publicly. But what about the rest of the black hole and the folks that you are part of that family? What's sort of the mood right now and the kind of take on what's going to happen coming up for Las Vegas?
I would say overall the mood is cautious anticipation. The excitement is always there whenever our team's performing, wherever it is across the land. We're excited because we just love to see them out there doing battle, if I can use that word loosely.
Sure.
I still consider the game as war. Everybody says it's just entertainment, but to me, a true football aficionado, it's war. That's why they call it X's and O's. It's competition from the kickoff, till you get back to the mess hall to after game dinners. But anyway, it's cautious anticipation. It's still gut wrenching for us just to come to the realization that they are leaving, but like I say, we got one more year at this to let's close it out right. Which last year it was a lot of tears and saying goodbye to people that we probably wouldn't see again. Just on the occasion that we saw each other at a road game or something. But a lot of us got priced out of, like you say, where we usually sit, me included. So, like I say, the future's up in the air for me. I don't know. I'm just hoping that something happens in between that I can still be in attendance.
All right. Well, the Violator, Wayne Mabry. Wayne, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you out here in Las Vegas soon and hope to talk to you again real soon as well.
Appreciate it, Scott. You guys have a blessed one.
That's going to do it for this show, Raider Nation. We appreciate you listening to the best of Silver and Black today. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be back here next week live, myself, Kelly Kreiner, and Chaz Osborne, to talk, as we do every week, about Raider football. Until that time, may the autumn wind always be at your back.
When tracking the domestic